Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Thanks for watching Alaska weather with us tonight, the 5th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. And you can always do that by using the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska or on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook or on YouTube. And if you can't find what you're looking for, let me know. david.snyder@noaa.gov is how you find me. Awful lot going on around the state, so we're going to whip right through it here. For Southeast tonight, winter storm warnings are posted for the areas shaded in red. Winter weather advisories for some of the northern inlet areas there, shaded in yellow. We'll start with that region there around Elfin Cove and Pelican especially, and around Chichagof Island and Teneke Springs. We're looking at about 4 to 5 inches of snow there, maybe about 3 to 5 around the Pelican area. Those winter weather advisories will start tonight and into tomorrow morning and probably be wrapped up by midday, let's say by noontime, for those winter weather advisories in yellow. For everywhere else in red, a winter storm warning is in effect. For the Juneau area, you're looking at about 8 to 14 inches of snow. This is going to come down starting tonight, about 9 o'clock or so, and probably really pick up as we go through the nighttime hours into Wednesday afternoon and evening. We're looking at about 7 to 10 inches around the Glacier Bay area, and that'll continue from about 6 p.m. tonight until 3 p.m. tomorrow. And as we get into the Mitkoff, Wrangell Island, especially around Petersburg and Wrangell, we're looking at about midnight tonight until midnight Wednesday for about 5 to 8 inches of snow. So again, a winter storm warning there for Southeast as the next round of weather moves your way. So prepare for snow there if you're under some level of color in the central and northern parts of the Panhandle. A look up north. This is a developing situation, especially for the areas in the orange. We're going to start there. This is a winter storm watch for the upper Koyukuk all the way to the Dalton Highway and westward and all of the Brooks Range, looking for about anywhere from about 5 inches of snow to about 12 inches of snow, especially in the higher train there. That's going to go from Wednesday night until about Friday for that winter storm watch, so a very long duration event. For everywhere shaded in red, you're under a winter storm warning, just like what we saw in Southeast, and that goes for the Bering Strait communities, the southern Seward Peninsula coastline, and eastern sections of Norton Sound and the Nulato Hills area. This is probably where we're going to have some of the worst weather, maybe as much as a foot of snow, maybe as little as about 6 to 8 inches of snow, but you're also going to be dealing with gusty winds, 40 to 50 mile-an-hour winds, coming in with this, reducing visibility, making travel pretty tricky there. We're not talking about blizzards yet, but we are talking about some poor visibility and certainly some accumulating snow with that. As you get into the interior of the Seward Peninsula, we're also looking at about 6 to 10 inches of snow, gusts there to about 45. Everywhere else in the Yukon Delta, all the way down toward Hooper Bay, probably talking about 4 to 8 inches of snow, maybe higher amounts of 6 to 10 as you go upriver a little bit. Looks like we're going to see this probably from about 6 a.m. Tomorrow to about 6 a.m. on Friday. And as you go up a little bit more into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, we're expecting there about 8 to 12 inches of snow, but not as much wind. So just about every location on the west coast and the Chukchi coast is going to be dealing with at least some level of snow, some level of wind, especially in the Bering Strait communities here. And on top of that, there's going to be some areas, especially the further south you go, that are going to run into about 1 to 2/10 of an inch of ice. So rain or perhaps some sleet mixing in with that snow. And that'll be a little bit more likely along the Seward Peninsula coastline and down into the Yukon Delta region. So keep an eye on the weather, time to prepare right now, and this is going to be a long duration event that goes really just about the rest of the week. Here's why. As we look at the satellite picture, we've got one very broad area of low pressure moving through the Bering Strait right now, but right after that, another wave, and right after that, there's another wave. For southeast, you can see the moisture filling in across the Gulf. This is just going to blast you with a quick round of heavy-hitting snow across the central and northern parts of the Panhandle. In the middle, we're just getting grazed by this across South Central. There's really not a whole lot of heavier snowfall opportunities. About 2 to 3 inches fell around South Central in some cases, maybe as much as 6 to 7 across some parts of the western Kenai Peninsula in the last 24 to 36 hours. But the main focus is really going to be across the west coast. Now, one concern we have is how much ice is sitting across the northern sections of the southern sections of the Kuskokwim Delta and northern parts of Bristol Bay. This ice has been getting a little more rotten there with the recent warm trend and certainly the amount of wind. So we're going to keep close watch on that, and if you have concerns, please do let us know. As we look at the surface chart this afternoon, high pressure is anchored up across the northern parts of Yukon, 1,025 millibars there, but the big storms that we're going to talk about are the 978 low just south and west of St. Lawrence Island and the 966 low that's sitting very close to, let's say, Attu right now. Moving to the north and east. Now, another wave of low pressure sitting across the Gulf as we get into tonight, that's going to slide east, pushing a frontal boundary right up against southeastern Alaska and really focusing that snow machine effect right across the northern and central parts of the Panhandle. A little bit further south into the Dixon entrance area, we're probably talking about rain. This is going to keep most of south central kind of out of the mix for right now, though Prince William Sound, you're looking at periods of rain and snow. As far as you go north and west of the Alaska Range, instantly you're into the snow for places like Galena, down into the Yukon Delta, into Norton Sound, and into Kotzebue Sound, again under winter storm warnings, and for many locations as you move toward the Brooks Range, winter storm watches that'll begin tonight and tomorrow. Out to the west, you can see that low pressure system across the Bering. The thunderstorm symbols tell us that there is convection available in that. That means a lot of upward moving air that helps to build precipitation areas, and in this case tells us this is an energetic winter storm. As this low moves northward, it's going to leave behind a frontal boundary here, and we're going to see a lot of training, a lot of moisture moving from south to north along this boundary, and that produces ample opportunity for routine areas of snow to set up, and with that, that's how we're going to get to 6 to 8, maybe even 12 inches of snow where you are in the west and the north. And we're also going to see some warmer air wrapped up in this. As we see rain moving in through Bristol Bay, there's an opportunity for periods of mixed precipitation, maybe freezing rain or sleet coming through. Most likely, the further upriver you go, you're going to talk about snow. And we're still going to be talking about snow mostly in central and northern parts of southeast. To the west of that boundary for you, it will be rain. For most of the eastern interior and south central, drier air will prevail into Tuesday or Wednesday, I should say. Do look for some periods of sunshine to pop out, but there will be another round of low pressure working through the Bering, and as this moves up the stalled boundary across the west coast, once again, Thursday will be a snowy and perhaps icy day for some parts of the lower and middle Yukon Valley into the Seward Peninsula, and then snow will really focus on the Brooks Range as we get into Wednesday night and into Thursday. So prepare for snow, especially across the west, and prepare for wind, and make sure you have a way to check your weather conditions before you go anywhere. Here's a quick check of temperatures for your Wednesday. 20s and 30s for southeast, for south central, lower to mid 20s there, 32 in Kodiak, 9 in Fairbanks, 60 below around Fort Yukon, just a little bit colder around Arctic Village. The North Slope looking at temps from 5 to 15 below, Utqiagvik 11 below, 20 above though in Kotzebue, 30 above in Nome. About the same for Unalakleet. You can see the warmth spreading all the way across the southwest, 20s and 30s there, and 30s to about 40 degrees for the Alaska Peninsula and the Chain, 32 in St. Paul with a high of 37 there on Wednesday. Interior temperatures back in the teens and 20s as we get into the afternoon. Still pretty cold for Fort Yukon, up to 0 for Utqiagvik Wednesday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to your aviation weather now. Over the next, really the rest of the week, the focus for aviation trouble is really going to be up and down the west coast with some side issues across the northern and eastern Gulf, but I really think the focus for your attention should be up and down the west coast from the southern Seward Peninsula coastline, St. Lawrence Island, all the way down the YK Delta and over the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. This is where that stream of moisture is going to focus on. In the meantime, a very powerful area of low pressure here is organizing out across the southern Bering Sea. You can see that as sign of convection there with the shower and thunderstorm symbol present there. IFR concerns will be found all the way around the Copper River Valley to southeast into the interior in the Yukon Valley, up into the Selawik Valley, and certainly out across the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta, as well as areas around Lake Iliamna and south and west. As we get into the afternoon tomorrow, you'll see some improvements across the interior. Watch for mixed areas of MVFR and IFR for the interior valleys, south and west into the YK coastline and all the way out to sea, and then some breaks as you head out into the central chain. That broad area of convection will still be there. And southeast is going to be looking at pretty hard IFR conditions pretty much through Wednesday afternoon and right on into Thursday morning. You'll notice a little bit of improvement in the northern valleys there, the Lynn Canal down to about the capital city, out through Cross Sound, and then the northern parts of the Gulf see some improvement all the way into Prince William Sound, but the west once again still stuck under IFR through Norton Sound and all the way up into the Kobuk, no attack areas, and also the upper Yukon Valley and the Chukchi Coast, with that area of convection moving eastward just a little bit more. As we get into Thursday afternoon, the focus is still across the west coast and southwest, parts of the Kenai Fjords and areas on the western end of the Susitna Valley, Kodiak Island. Major improvements for parts of southeast by the afternoon, so that's good. And the upper end of the Yukon Valley and the Copper River Valley look better. Parts of the North Slope are okay, but the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range may prevent you from getting through some of your favorite passes as we go through the afternoon. Let's take a look at your pass conditions in detail for tomorrow. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass both expected to be IFR throughout your day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will hold at IFR as we go. As you get into Rainy Pass, that too probably lifting or holding at IFR, but as we move a little bit further eastward, you'll see gradual improvements there. MVFR transitioning to visual flight rule for Windy Pass. Probably a start at IFR and Isabel Pass, but then improving weather as we go throughout your day to VFR. The same goes for Mentasta Pass. Look for an IFR start, though. Tanita Pass, looking for IFR conditions to start your day. VFR to wrap it up. And Portage Pass, also looking for some substantial improvements throughout your afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass, probably hard down at IFR through most of your day. Freezing levels show us that warm and wet air is lifting northward again. This is, again, going to be a big focus for the west coast through the next several days there as a substantial southerly flow holds pretty much in the same old spot. Across southeast, the surface freezing line right along the north and eastern Gulf Coast, 2,000-foot line there just south and west of Juneau, right along Sitka and down toward Craig and Metlakatla. 4,000 and 6,000-foot lines there in view just off the southwestern coast, or the outer coast of southeast. For freezing potential and icing, you'll notice the levels there are climbing anywhere from 5 to about 7,000 feet. There's plenty of moisture to be had, but again, you're going to have to get up there to get into some of the colder stuff. Above 4,000 feet across the upper Yukon Valley, and we were getting some reports of significant icing across areas closer to Kenai earlier today. Above 7,000 feet, pretty broad for most of southeast and at least isolated moderate across the southern Bering, but that is up above 10,000 feet for tomorrow. The jet stream has a very pronounced trough across the southern Bering and into the North Pacific with wind speeds there at 145 to 160 knots. That combines with a strong southerly flow moving pretty much due north across the west coast of Alaska, 65 to as high as 160 knots on the western side of that ridge. Once that makes its way up across the North Slope, it descends once again into that very pronounced trough across the rest of North America. This is where all the cold and storm activity is going. But for us, it's going to kind of split the difference for most of Alaska. So what do we get out of it? A pretty active storm pattern that's really going to be focused on the west coast as we go through your Wednesday. That trough of low pressure sitting across the Bering will drive in a lot of southerly winds, and right now it looks like wind speeds probably on the order of 50 to 60 knots at 9,000 feet will be the rule. Then we get into a little bit of a westerly flow for the interior and an onshore flow for most of southeast with low pressure part close to Haida Gwaii. You'll see at 3,000 feet, not a whole lot of difference there. The low is a little closer to Sitka. In this case, our southerlies at 3,000 feet are just rip-roaring away at 45 to 50 knots. They're all the way up and down the west coast. Our trough of low pressure sitting out across the Bering, driving in some fast winds for the Aleutian chain as well. So we're going to have to talk about turbulence really the rest of the week, and at times we will have some isolated severe, I think, due to wind speeds and some shear alone, generally below 6,000 feet across the west coast and the interior mountains, and below 4,000 feet for the Alaska Peninsula and most of the central and eastern chain for considerable moderate.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters, can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the hazardous weather test bed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
On to your marine weather now. One thing we'll be watching over the next couple of days is how much ice we continue to lose here around the northern sections of Bristol Bay and approaching the Kuskokwim Delta area. With a healthy south wind, a gusty situation, and certainly warmer weather, the ice that is protecting the coastline needs to be monitored. Right now we do have some shore-fast ice across the region, also on the northern end of the Kuskokwim Delta, so there is some protection there. But as you have concerns or as you see changes in the sea ice there or areas of coastal erosion, it would be helpful to know if you're in any of the communities there across the southwest coast. At this time, we are not predicting any coastal issues, but we'd certainly like to hear your opinion and thoughts on that if you see different observations there in your local area. Up across the north, the sea ice is becoming a little more ragged across regions north of Etolan Strait, north of Nunivak Island, and around St. Lawrence Island again with this persistent warm weather, and ice continues to change across northern sections of Cook Inlet. You can see the very latest analysis from today, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. For southeast, look for a broad south and easterly flow across the inside passages there, 20 knots from the south and east with 4-foot seas. Northerlies in Lynn Canal, also at 20 knots, 25 knots as you move up toward Yakutat and Icy Cape. As we get into Thursday, winds really don't get too strong with this one. North and westerlies coming down the outer coast. A little bit of a stronger, gustier flow across northern Lynn Canal around Skagway, for example, gust to 35 with 4-foot seas, and winds around 10 to 15 as you head from Stevens Passage into Clarence Strait on Thursday. For South Central, light winds inside of Prince William Sound, 2-foot seas there, 5 to 6-foot seas across the northern Gulf, and northerlies coming down Cook Inlet over the ice, 2 to 3-foot seas in the open waters. About 10 to 15 knots there will become south and easterly, 20 knots over the Barren, with about 4 to 6-foot seas there on Thursday. Light winds continue inside of Prince William Sound, outside of Montague Island, north and easterlies there, 10 knots with 5-foot seas. Southerlies coming into Resurrection Bay at 15 knots with a 5-foot sea. For Bristol Bay, southeasterlies over the open waters, 25 knots with a 7-foot sea. Stronger winds down the coastline, and you can see a little bit of a higher fetch building there, 35 knots with 11-foot seas, generally east of the Pribilofs. As you move from Kodiak Island southward down the coast, 20 to 35 knots expected there for 9 to 18-foot seas, with the higher seas building in generally west and south of Sand Point on Wednesday. Those build north and east as we head into Thursday, 25 to 35 on the Pacific Coast waters, 11 to 19 14-foot seas there. In Shelikof Strait, southeasterly is about 25 knots with 6-foot seas and 8-foot seas down the Bering Strait coast with Bering Sea coast, I should say, with 30-knot winds as we go through your Thursday afternoon. For the Aleutians, the highest winds and seas will be south of the Pacific coast, about 30 to 35 knots. You're looking at about 19 to 26-foot seas, and broad southerlies all the way from the Bering Sea coast westward, 24 to 29-foot seas out in the west with a 30-knot wind. But notice these are northerlies from Kiska to Attu there with that 24-foot sea on Wednesday. Now everything becomes west and southwesterly as we get into Thursday, and wave after wave will be coming through. The highest winds and seas likely just south of the chain and to the west, generally 25 to 35 knots in all areas, and 20 to 22-foot seas for the Pacific coast on the north side, a little more shielded with 10 to 14-foot seas, 22-foot seas though out in the west on Thursday. For the west coast again, we're going to watch the ice here around Togiak up to Quinnipiac and up toward the Kuskokwim Delta. 25 to 35 knots in most of the regions south of the main ice edge, 12 to 13-foot seas there, and you're looking at 35 to 40 knots north of Nunivak Island approaching the St. Lawrence Island region and Bering Strait. For Thursday, 25 to 30 knot winds continue, 6 to 14-foot seas in the region, the highest around the Pribilofs with that 30-knot wind, 25 knots coming into Nome over the ice, 20 knots over St. Lawrence Island as well. For the Bering Strait communities and the Chukchi coast, 25 to 35 knots from the south and southeast on Wednesday, easterlies over the Beaufort, 10 to 20. As we get into Thursday, a south and easterly flow, 20 to 25, and south and southeasterly winds off the Chukchi coast and over the Bering Strait, 20 to 25 for your Thursday. Recapping tonight's winter storm watches and warnings, a broad area of winter storm watches from the Brooks Range and down into the Koyukuk Valley will continue from tonight all the way into Friday. For many along the west coast, including St. Lawrence Island, down toward the Yukon Delta and north through the Seward Peninsula and the Chukchi Coast, winter storm warnings are in effect. You may see as much as 8 to 12 inches of snow and gusts from 45 to 50 miles per hour. And some areas, especially in the Yukon Delta and the Seward Peninsula coastline, could be looking at light amounts of ice mixing in. For regions in southeast, especially for the central and northern parts of the Panhandle, you're expected to see accumulating snow as well. For your region, you may see as much as 8 to 14 inches in the capital city and about 3 to 5 for more northern locations. Have a good night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.